Honest Truth met Benita Vergatini.
Smile 90.4 FM.
Joining us this evening on Smile FM to speak on how bold energy innovation could unlock South Africa's education future is the co-founder at the Future of Energy, Dr. Sam Duby. Dr. Duby, good evening. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
You've described South Africa's education crisis as inseparable from its energy crisis. Why are they so interlinked?
So South Africa, as anyone with their eyes open can tell, is having a multi-crisis. I think there's lots of different terms for it, some of which cannot be said on the radio possibly. And this is down to some very structural problems that we have. A lot of them are interlinked, largely around money that's been earmarked for certain functions, not actually getting to deliver those services on the ground. The links between energy and education that I've been making in the article are about how the education performance of South African public schools is woefully low. And that's largely a function of the lack of decent teachers and that being the simple point of leverage to increase the educational outcomes. At the same time, the schools are floundering when it comes to their financials, not least of all their energy bills. And so our little piece of the puzzle is around that energy aspect. And what we have shown, and we've got pilots and various models that show this to be the case, we've got successfully operating models, is that by providing solar on the school rooftop and by effectively decentralizing the school's energy supply, they can save enough money straight away to employ another teacher. Now, beyond that, the school actually purchase energy at a much lower rate from the organization. That money obviously pays for the maintenance to keep the solar system running. And this is a major change from a lot of solar school interventions in the past where there was very little planning for longer term maintenance and keeping the lights on. So some of that money goes into the maintenance. Some of the money goes into a school governed school improvements fund. So in the case of some of our schools in Cape Town, they're using that to, for example, update or renovate the gents' bathrooms, for example. And then a third pot is what we call the Pay It Forward Fund, which essentially means that every 5 to 7 years, there's enough money in this pot that an additional school can be electrified, can be solarized, and the process effectively doubles. So essentially what this means is that a single capital input, whether that's coming from the public or the private sector, can have a mushrooming effect that is both saving the school money, allowing them to spend more money on teachers and electrifying further schools, not to mention giving the school energy independence. So this is just one of the linkages between education and energy.
I see that the Curo transition potentially to a public benefit organization may be quite significant in reframing education. Dr. Duby, how do you see smart schools building on that kind of transformative private sector momentum?
Yes, so I think that the Curio example is fascinating because it shows two things. It shows, one, that there is a serious lack of service delivery on the ground. So the current incumbent system is simply not delivering. So that's the first clarion call. The second very important point is the fact that there are other ways of doing things. So the Curio deal essentially is talking about how private education can step in and essentially provide some of these services. What is unique is that it's come from the private sector, the fact that he is effectively donating the profits from these schools back into driving the system. So what that shows is that there are private sector-led models that can be applied to public sector service delivery. And I think that this is a loud clarion call for how the public sector can more efficiently, more accountably allocate resources by sensible public-private partnerships, by applying some of the efficiency delivery models that come from the private sector. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and I think the Curio deal is a fascinating example. And it's a sad thing that it takes a very progressive, forward-looking individual like Yanni Mouton to show that this needs to happen. There's a huge amount of innovation in the private sector that can be applied to delivery of public services.
Yeah, if you're not aware, billionaire Yanni Mouton's family trust offered 7.2 billion rand to buy out Curo Holdings. If the deal goes through, Curo will convert from a profit-making listed company to a non-profit public benefit organization. As Dr. Duby had mentioned, all surpluses will be reinvested into classrooms, bursaries, school expansion, and it certainly will do a lot for improving access to quality education, particularly for rural communities. Apparently, the way things stand at the moment, the Curo shareholders will be voting on this at their AGM at the end of October, with finality, I think, being provided by December. One should know which way the winds are blowing in this regard. Dr. Duby, you've spoken about financial innovation as the key to solarizing schools in South Africa. What does that innovation look like in practical terms?
Yeah, so the Curium example that you just gave, essentially what it means is that by plowing the profits back into building more schools, you have a self-replicating model. So more schools beget more schools. What we're saying is that exactly the same principle can apply to solarization. And when we talk about solarizing schools, the model doesn't just apply to schools. It's about solarizing anything, really. Public sector buildings, private buildings. And essentially what it means is that if we can provide the upfront capital, if we can get some capital to put solar on a school or a public building, we can then charge the person the off-taker, if you like, charge them a tariff which is less than they are currently paying. We can then use that money to pay for all of the maintenance, to pay back the capital that we've borrowed potentially, and have enough money to build another school. So the financial innovation is about making sure that it's a win-win-win on all sides. And essentially what you then get is this self-replicating model. Either if the funding is coming from a concessionary side and there's a grant, for example, then the impact will double every 5 to 7 years. If it's coming from a more commercial side, then investors are paid back with a healthy rate of return, and therefore we can get more investment going forward once these returns are proven. So either way, it's a chance to scale up, whether it's with private sector or public sector. It's just about the innovation of putting that upfront capital in, buying the solar. As we all know, the difficulty with solar is the upfront costs. Even if you're getting so-called free energy long term, it's just surmounting that upfront capital requirement barrier for schools, for public sector buildings. And we're showing this is possible. The costs of the solar are coming down all the time. It's only becoming more and more viable. And South Africa really is in an interesting position of being very progressive. We've got huge amounts of solar energy. We've got a huge amount of potential workforce that can be retrained to being solar installers. There is a lot of potential here in South Africa, and we're seeing that this is going to happen. It's not going to be us. It's that the cat will be out of the bag, and then it will grow exponentially.
The data, Dr. Duby, suggests, in fact, that it is workable 8.6 billion rand to solarize every school projected, yet that could save annually 2.2 billion rand. Why is this opportunity not being seized upon yet by government or private sector?
It's a good question. We're currently trying to seize on it. So we've shown that the model makes sense. It's only in the last couple of years that regulation has caught up that actually allows this to happen. So since the regulations changed about a couple of years ago, it allowed independent power producers to sell electricity. That was never really possible before. So essentially that unlocked a lot of the business models that actually, as our company, the future of energy, most of the work we do is around the rest of Africa. We tend to build solar mini-grids, which are village-scale solar power stations in unelectrified villages, in countries where the regulation supports that. So recently in South Africa, the regulations changed to support that. So that unlocked a huge amount of the potential business or delivery model innovation, and we're capitalizing on that. So that's the major reason why it hasn't happened so far. Also, as I say, the costs of the technology are coming down all the time. So it's only relatively recently reached a point whereby solar is the cheapest form of energy we've ever had as a species, and it's only getting cheaper. So a lot of the variables are converging on the fact that now is the time.
What kind of investors or funding partners do you feel are best positioned to support this type of initiative?
So we would like to see a variety. So we think that there's a really good case for public sector finance to do this. As I say, electrifying schools, it's just a win-win-win for everybody. So I think that there should be some public money put into it. But we also wouldn't want to just shoehorn ourselves into that category. We do think this is an excellent business, and we think there's a lot of scope for commercial gains to be had from this, and a lot of scope for applying the same kind of model in a more commercial context. So I think the question is, how fast do we want to electrify schools? How fast do we want to decentralize South Africa's energy infrastructure? And this is just one mechanism to do that, both in the public sector and in the private sector. So any capital that can affordably put up front to put solar onto a building, whether it's private or public, will be able to pay itself back in a surprisingly short amount of time. So any capital, we're happy with anything, put it that way.
It also links quite beautifully to the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan as well, because there will be job creation. I would imagine that these solar-based or these school-based solar projects can also be linked to skills development and youth employment as well.
100%. And so the longer-term vision that we see is that these schools won't just be islands that are with energy. We're working with an interesting organization which has software which couples into the municipality billing system, which essentially creates a willing buyer, willing seller micro market for the energy. So the school can conceivably sell any excess power to householders in that local area who might not be able to afford or might not have access to a rooftop. They can then buy solar energy that's actually generated by the school. So this provides an additional form of income for the school. But at the same time, having these solar panels on the roof, and this has been borne out in our pilot in Rocklands in Cape Town, effectively you've got a living laboratory on the roof. You've got this working power station. We've already explored how that can be integrated into the school curriculum, but we've also been talking about how it can be linked to direct youth training programs. So there's quite a few South African solar installation certification programs who could benefit hugely by having access to these, as I say, kind of living laboratories for people to learn how to do the maintenance. There are a huge amount of people, for example, those coming out of the coal industry, there's huge amounts of youth unemployment who could effectively have localized places where they can train, they can learn how to install solar panels, they can earn an income by managing and maintaining the local systems. So it provides also these islands of potential skills training. And I'm really excited about that too. Not least of all because it will mean that we have a decentralized infrastructure of local maintainers, but also because there's a huge opportunity for job creation, a huge opportunity.
Absolutely. This kind of innovation certainly has a transformative impact, and that kind of thinking is what's needed to improve South Africa's education. Lastly, Dr. Duby, what have been the lessons learned so far, some of the positive developments coming out of the pilot study at Rocklands?
So we've been very pleasantly surprised by a number of things. The school are over the moon with the situation. We've been carefully monitoring exactly how much money they're saving. They're very happy. They've immediately cognizant of the value that it immediately brings. Obviously, they got all sorts of load shedding proofing. They weren't subject to the same kind of load shedding that the rest of us were. Essentially, and we realized that the model makes sense. It just makes financial sense. So we've got lots and lots of data that shows it makes sense. We've been very excited by the interest that other people have shown in the model, whether it's schools who want to join the program, whether it is progressive municipalities who are interested in getting access to this kind of model. So I've been really positively surprised by how much traction this is getting in a relatively short time.
Encouraging stuff indeed. How can we follow the future of energy?
So our website is thefutureof.energy. So that's probably the first place to start. We've got sections there on all the projects we do around Africa, but also in South Africa where we are. We're South African staffed. So thefutureof.energy is our website, no .com or anything like that. So follow us, get in touch. If you're interested to know more, please reach out. My email address is sam@thefutureof.energy. I'd love to talk to you if you're interested in getting involved.
Co-founder at the Future of Energy, Dr. Sam Duby. Thank you, Dr. Duby. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for your time.